the first thing that all of you must know is that you are lawyers or are becoming lawyers. Judges and law teachers in India, now and at all times, I include myself, are always students of law. And you must remember that on becoming an advocate, although justifiably Hindi is the language most frequently written and spoken in India, whilst 44% of India's population speaks and writes in Hindi. You may be surprised to know that there are many as 55 recognized dialects of Hindi in different parts of the country, of which only each of the top 25 dialects are spoken by more than 15 lakhs of people. So the task of choosing one dialect is extremely difficult. English has this advantage. Though spoken with different accents in different parts of the country, it has no dialect. English is not a foreign language in India. It is in fact the first language of the internet, and it is one of the only two official languages of India recognized in India's constitution. And it was the famous Munshi Iyengar Committee compromise formula that was hammered out and adopted by the Constituent Assembly in September 1949, but for which perhaps our constitution might never have come into being at all. So the first important thing you do on becoming an advocate is to improve your knowledge of and your proficiency in English. Proficiency is important. And you must do this by reading and absorbing the great pieces of writing in English literature. This is not in order to make you anglicized. Far from it. It is to give you an opportunity to help you to be successful in the legal profession. And only this because of one reason and one reason alone. Because the law in India is English in origin. The legal system in India is linked inextricably with the English language, both of which were originally imported in British India from abroad. It was an English transplant with Anglo-Saxon roots. And the legal system in India has grown over the years, but nourished in Indian soil. What was intended to be an English oak has turned into a large, sprawling Indian banyan tree whose roots have descended to the ground and come up again as new trunks. Please remember that all the great concepts in our Constitution are Anglo-American. Anglo-American. Justice, liberty, equality, rule of law. The practice of law can always gain from a sympathetic engagement with literature. An American judge, Justice Felix Frankfurter, is a name that is or should be familiar to you all, because he was the judge whom India's constitutional advisor B.N. Rao had consulted when he drafted the constitution and before it was enacted. But he is famous also for another reason. Way back in 1954, a 12-year-old American student living in Alexandria, Virginia, in the United States, wrote a letter directly to the judge saying he was interested in going into law as a career and requested advice from the judge. Frankfurter's famous advice to a young man interested into going into law is now in the public domain for everyone to read. And this was his advice. Please listen carefully. I am quoting the advice of Justice Frankfurter. The best way to prepare for the law is to come to the study of the law as a well-read person. This alone can one acquire the capacity to use the English language on paper and in speech, and with the habits of clear thinking, which only a truly liberal education can give. So, stock your mind with the deposit of much good reading. They are very nice words. Stock your mind with the deposit of much good reading, and widen and deepen your feelings by experiencing as much as possible the wonderful mysteries of the universe, and forget all about your future career. Unquote. This was Frankfurter's advice to a young person who wanted to go into law. It remains valid today for India and for young India, and I pass it on to you with my recommendation. You will find Justice Frankfurter's famous advice to a law student, and it is only famous because it is published in a book that used to be widely read, and the book is titled The World of Law. It is unfortunately no longer available because it is out of print. The book is in 2 volumes. The title of volume 1 is The Law in Literature, and the title of volume 2 is The Law as Literature. In these 2 volumes you will find extracts of essays, opinions, stories, records of famous trials, all compiled by a distinguished English constitutional lawyer of the last century, Ephraim London. That was his name, Ephraim London. And these 2 volumes contain a mine of very useful and excellent writing in English. If you find the book is unavailable, because the book was published nearly 60 years ago, feel free to write to me and I'll be glad to send you some extracts which you must read and digest so that you come up to scratch in the profession. You will then be Frankfurter trained in the law. For India's first festival of law and literature, I have a message. It's a very fine venture which I wholly endorse. In fact, all of you must know that the great jurist Sir Dinsha Mulna, who is no longer alive, he was a great writer. He wrote books on Hindu law, Mohammedan law, the Civil Procedure Code, all sorts of things. And when he was very young, and before he took to the law, he thought he was a poet because he had written some poems. And he had the effrontery at that time, because he was a young man full of vigor. He wrote to the poet laureate of London, Lord Tennyson of England. And in those days, letters didn't go or travel, they traveled very slowly, took a couple of weeks. But just imagine the courtesy of the poet laureate. Here was Lord Tennyson sitting in England, some unknown fellow called Dinsha Mullah, who wrote him a letter saying that should he stick to poetry or should he take to the law? And Tennyson, in his own hand, wrote a letter. In those days, there was no dictation, nobody typed, there was no email. And he wrote and said to this unknown gentleman, "Dear Mr. Mullah, I have read all the poems you have sent to me, but I advise you to stick to the law." So you will see that but for Mullah following that advice, and but for Tennyson giving him that advice, we would have been bereft of one of our great jurists of our time, Sardin Shah Mullah. So that's why I say that I am delighted that you are really now embarking on something which needs to be done for the Indian public.